please help me thank Katherine for that beautiful song.
Might as well now do 2 sound checks.
So may I have some very quick costume change music? Thank you for that moment. Thank you. So I'm so pleased that I asked you if you would sing, because Katherine and I are meeting for the first time today for this show, and we had a little bit of correspondence by email, and I read your bio, which we'll talk about the organization that you work for. But the bio mentioned your musical studies and musical background, and that you sing. Just to be very, very open with the process or the spontaneity of doing this show, I never heard you sing before, and you were very open in your email to say, oh, sure, I could do this, I could do that, and you said acapella, and acapella means that we don't have, the musicians don't have to figure it out. It's not the formal definition. So that was gorgeous. And I'm curious, is that a written piece? Was it improvised? How did that piece come about?
So that piece is actually an old folk song. It's known as Sealed Song. So if any of you are familiar with the tale of Sailkey, they're kind of like the Celtic merfolk. And so the idea of the Sailkey is that they have coats that they'll put on or take off as kind of a way that they transform between water-dwelling peoples and a land-dwelling peoples. So that song is speaking about a Sailkey who is singing. So that's the story of it. It's one that I heard when I was quite young. So I learned this via oral tradition, which is very fitting for such a piece.
Right. So I want to include in our conversation, is it?
Yes.
Do you want to do a little test?
Shall we test?
There you go.
There we go.
Oh, we're good?
I can also continue to speak quite loudly if we need to. I hear it now. Wonderful.
Okay, or we can do the interview as song.
Yes, exactly.
And that would project.
That won't wear out my voice at all.
Not at all, neither shall I. So, you're speaking about an oral tradition, and so I can, do I gather from that the story, the mythology from which the song originates is your family background? I mean, is a part of your family background?
Yes and no. It's definitely one of the styles of music that I sort of grew up with. So I grew up with people who did medieval reenactment. It's called the SCA, Society for Creative Anachronism. I also worked with the Pirates of Cascadia, Pirates of Portlandia, the Rose City Steampunks, a bunch of groups like that. And growing up, Celtic music was a very big part of the family, just generally speaking. It was something that my mother used to sing, so one of my childhood lullabies was Summertime Is Comin', which is a very common Scottish folk song.
Oh.
So it's just one of those things where it's been in my ear for a very, very long time because of those kind of regions that I grew up with.
Wow. I just love the kind of, well, the randomness of having asked you to sing, and now it opens a door to a culture. I mean, I certainly am aware of Celtic music. I mean, there were periods that I would receive a Celtic newsletter when I lived in Denver, and there were different venues that would have some just gorgeous music. Um, and I don't want to get too far afield from the work that you do for a nonprofit organization that I understand is based or founded in Aurora, Colorado. So could you speak about, and now I call my Swiss cheese mind or memory, if you would speak about that organization, which I already know does some amazing community building work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with a nonprofit organization called Roshni, which is another word for light, in actually multiple languages, including like Hindi, Urdu, Pashto, bunch of different languages. Our founder, Deepali, is from India, so we have obviously quite a bit of influence there. Our goal as Roshni is to actually work with underserved members of the community in the Aurora area, which we all know is a beautiful mosaic of culture and peoples from various areas. I personally do a lot with our youth group, which is called New American Stories. So we go to Title IX schools and work with a lot of different schools for working with kiddos to write and act and perform their own unique and original plays. So we just this last year, I think, worked with about 9 different schools doing that. And then I was actually originally hired on to Roshni to work with a women's group called Sew and Sing, where we work with refugee asylee women to kind of bring them out of their homes into a community of other women, so that they have that safe space to meet women outside of their families, to practice more conversational English, which can be such a barrier, especially when you're first coming out here, because we only work with women who've been in the country for 5 years or less. And then we also teach them kind of like some wellness stuff, and we use singing to not only continue teaching English, since melody is a really awesome contributor to memory, it also allows them to gain some of the confidence in using their voice as an expressive tool, particularly in certain regions like Congo or in Iraq or Iran, where women are not really encouraged to speak. And then, of course, we also have the sewing portion, which is fabulous because they learn a skill. A lot of them have a lot of children, so it's something that they can use at home and gain a lot of confidence being able to have something independent that can eventually lead to potentially work for them.
Wow. You've said, what you said contains a lot of information, and I would like to kind of seek out or maybe stumble upon some of the stepping stones of your own journey and how it is expressed in the work that you're doing with Roshni. So one of the things I heard is you're dealing with women who have been in the U.S. for 5 years or less, who come from very different cultures from our American culture, which I was taught is a melting pot, but I think that may not be quite true. I mean, if you come from another culture and another language, it's got to be very, very tough to be in this country as a foreign land. So what in your background prepared you for doing this, I want to call it angelic, well, it's certainly on the side of the angels. I mean, you're helping people who may not, well, who just may be lost in this culture. How did your life lead you to this kind of helping others?
That's an excellent question, and I'm not sure it's quite linear. So, like, when I kind of like explain to people why I do the work that I do, because, for example, with the kiddos, something that I've always really wanted to do is be able to work with children who wouldn't have the resources to maybe have music lessons. I was a private instructor for a long time because there is this thing called bills that do need to be paid. So I was teaching for quite a while, but of course that is not accessible. I myself, I've been singing for about 20 years now, but I only started taking lessons my senior year of high school, and the only reason we could do that is because I was going to college for music. So my parents were trying to give me some resources to help me get started, do those like college auditions. So I knew growing up that sometimes you just don't have the resources to be able to pursue something as expressive as music, right? Because the thing with music is it develops a lot more portions of the mind and the soul than even just technique and embouchure, and I'm not sure where he went, but I remember the word. I'm good on the quiz, promise. The voices. You know, stuff like that. So I, that's kind of where I started with that. But like working with the women and everything, a lot of that just comes down to I find that like if you just take politics as a giant, we'll call it an umbrella to be kind. There's so many things that are important. There's so many things that like you want to be able to give to, but functionally you really can only give to one or two things.
Right.
So by doing this work, I really feel good because I can give a lot of my time and energy to something that I do find is important because, as you said, like we are culturally considered more of a melting pot. I personally think of America more as a stone soup. It doesn't mean that everything is homogenous. It means that a lot of things were put into the same pot. A lot of things can be brought out. The flavors can shift. The flavors can adjust because the more we put in of one thing, the more something is brought out.
Right.
So right now, our Sound Sing, we work a lot with Afghani women, for example. So I've learned a lot more about working with Afghani women specifically and kind of how they need to learn, because something that, and I know I'm kind of going sideways because again, that's how I got into this, is a little bit sideways. Something that we don't really think about, right? When you're thinking, oh, I'm going to teach someone English. Well, what if that person's never been to school before? What if they don't know how homework works? What if they don't know how to study? What if they don't know how to do that? Because a lot of these women already speak more than one language, but it's because they had to. It's because they had to speak it. So they learned by listening and speaking. So how do we use those skills instead of textbooks, instead of written exams, instead of, you know, videos? Because these are resources that they haven't been taught how to use. And so, again, circling back around to how did I get here? I did private instruction. I taught one-on-one. And the key principle of teaching one-on-one is meeting the student where they are at. It's not about reaching a benchmark. It's about reaching their goals, reaching their potential, reaching where they want to be. And I really get to use a lot of those principles with these groups because I get to see, okay, where have they come from? Where are we aiming for? And how can we really support their particular journey on their way to that?
Wow. So the teaching one-on-one became your learning for being sensitive to what are the needs of a larger group, and the group might be a particular culture, a particular nationality. It makes me curious if you have traveled the world. I mean, is that part of your, I don't know, tools that you've been to so many different countries and you yourself have been a stranger in a strange land? Is that any part of your background?
I have done a little bit of traveling. When I was younger in high school, I was fortunate enough to be accepted into an ambassador group. So I was in the People to People Ambassadors group when I was 13, which was started by Dwight D. Eisenhower with the idea that young people should meet other young people from other cultures in order to, in the future, promote a better, like, interconnected global sense of community. And then the second group that I was with the Wyoming Ambassadors of Music. That's where I graduated high school. And that's just, we were gigging around a couple of places in Europe and stuff, which was phenomenal because, again, I did get to step outside of, you know, the world that I had known. But honestly, I think actually growing up with the reenactors and the SCA and doing parades and stuff is really what allowed me to have the perspective on people that I do, because I was constantly meeting strangers and finding out that, you know, even though I don't know you, I can understand you, right? And music was another way that I had that same lesson, because as a singer, I actually have worked with many, many languages, many of which I do not speak. You know, I can sing in French, I can sing in Russian, I can sing in Korean. I can learn all of these things and express the music without understanding, because there's something that is simply human in music. And that's kind of how I approach this, is it's less of feeling like a stranger and more of feeling like connecting with a person, connecting with a being. Because at our core, regardless of the beautiful feathers, regardless of like all of these cultural complexity, we are human.
Right.
So.
Well, you're stating, I think, a fundamental or even core belief that there is something universal in being human, in being a human being, and if more of us could know that, maybe more of the time, we might have a more generous world.
I think it's scary, because here's the thing: if you're going to meet someone as a being,
Right.
you also have to be open to being known like that. And that can be really scary, right? Because like if I take away that I am, these 20 things, that I come from, these states, that I come from this country, that I come from this culture, that I have these foods, right?
Right.
And I strip myself down to being a human. I'm letting you see me at a much more fundamental level, and that is much more vulnerable, right? Empathy takes a certain amount of vulnerability, and that can be quite scary when you are talking to a stranger. So I think there is that level to it.
Well, it makes me.
Yes, ask the non-poet about language.
The non-poet, but here you are speaking to people of many different cultures, and it must take a certain kind of grace or poetry in order to communicate.
I think communication is it's the biggest sticking point and also the only way forward, right? Hector over here is yelling at me about pronouns. To enlighten you, I am in the queer community.
Right.
My pronouns are she, her, but I have quite a few friends who are they, them. And as an educator for a decade now, that's something that people will ask me a lot about is, well, why do they use plurals? And they don't. They, them is both singular and plural, right? So to expand a little bit, humor me if you will, I'm going to walk you through a hypothetical conversation, right?
Sure.
So let's say Hector has a cousin coming to town to visit, right? Hector has a cousin. And I have just told you Hector's cousin is coming to town, right?
Right.
Now, if you don't know where Hector's cousins live, what might you ask me about Hector's cousin?
Where do they come from?
Where did they come from?
Right.
One cousin, but we use they, right?
Right.
The use of a gender-neutral pronoun is not at all new. A famous example is Shakespeare actually was using they and them as singular gender-neutral pronouns within his works. Because again, we do use it quite conversationally if we do not know a specified gender, right? Now, people who are gender-neutral, gender-fluid, right, what they're sort of saying is that the expression of a particular gender, one way or the other, doesn't quite fit. So they are trying to explain to you by using these pronouns that that expression doesn't quite fit who they are, right? So that's kind of my little spiel about they, them.
Right, and my understanding is if the he, she, him, her is limiting, if it feels like, oh, somebody is attempting to put me in a box because of my appearance or whatever impression a person is giving, it can feel very uncomfortable.
And it can, and I think something that particularly American dialogues regarding this issue kind of skirt around or perhaps forget sometimes is gender is actually a cultural expression. If you look at it from an anthropological lens, right, how we express gender varies widely internationally. For example, from how we dress, right, to how we interact with each other, all of these are gendered things that we're taught from when we're very young. And these expressions of gender and gender role and gender identity vary, right? So for example, we'll use Scotland, wears kilts. But if we go to England, they would not be caught dead wearing a skirt, right? In certain regions of Africa, men will sit in each other's laps, and that is considered a platonic affection, right? A platonic affection. That's perfectly fine to be masculine and expressed that way, right? Or if you go to Latin America, often we have like the machismo, right? Where they have to be strong and they have to be tough, right? And I think American society leans a little bit more towards that direction, where masculine peoples need to be strong, they need to be tough, right? I am a feminine person, but I have put time into gaining strength, right? So I can lift a little over 200 pounds, so I can pick a person up, right? But I'm still feminine. So it's that thing where when you're talking about gender, there is so much more to it when you take it into the larger spectrum of what a person is, you know? And on the same hand, gender is the smallest portion of what a person is, because they are a mind and a soul before they are a body.
Right, right. So clearly, these are things you have thought deeply about. I mean, you are extremely articulate about these questions, these issues, and I'm impressed with how you express this very clearly and simply, and I'm also I'm still curious how you came to be who you are. I mean, to have this understanding and this openness. In general, my own observation is that younger people and people younger than myself are more sensitive to and more clear about the boundaries of language or the limitations of language. So again, this is one person's observation. It's something more known and more discussed or made more aware of by younger people. How could you speculate, or maybe you have an opinion about how did it come about, this awareness of pronouns and awareness of gender? I mean, one way I have one or two sentences to sum up what gender was for me, let's say in college. There was male, female, and gay. It was really just that, and at that time, I could speak of high school. There was a movie. It began as a play called Boys in the Band, and this was an artistic expression, a theatrical expression of what it was to be gay in America, maybe in, let's say, circa 1963 or something. And I remember seeing that movie in high school, and my friends, my male friends identifying with he and him, we were each would say, "Wow, I'm glad I'm not gay," you know, because it seemed like a challenge and a place of suffering and a place of hiding, and I would say gender in my high school and into college was a place where if it was not on the straight and narrow, I emphasize straight, it was something to, oh my gosh, it would be taking a very, very difficult road. So, boy, so what is my question? I mean, that's one long comment. And I'm tired of my own voice. How is it that you and perhaps a whole generation of people like yourself have it, I think, far more together than an older generation?